Today, you're going to pick up 5 ways to never, well, almost never run out of things to say and how you can apply them right away, whether it's a networking event, whether it's you on a date and you run out of things to say, or when you're delivering a speech and you don't know what to say next. So we'll talk about the 5 ways that you can never run out of things to say. Now, my favorite one is the one that I use the most. It's the most common and it's the easiest one to do, and it's also the one where you don't have to do a lot of work. So the first technique you're going to learn is what I call the ABCR method. It sounds very scientific, but believe me, it's very simple. It's the one that is the most useful for me in every single conversation. So let's break it down. Let's say you are in a conversation and you're not quite sure how to keep it going. You're not quite sure how to keep the flame alive, and how do you not constantly come up with things to say? Because I don't know if you're anything like me, but sometimes when I'm at a networking event and I meet someone, I ask them a question, and then while they're answering, I'm already thinking of the next question and the next question and the next question, and I'm getting nervous because I'm running out of material. Has that happened to you before? Well, it certainly happened to me a whole lot, and this is how I use the ABCR technique to fix that. Let's break it down. What does ABCR stand for? The first thing is you ask a story question. So let's say you just met someone and you said, "What do you do? Where are you from?" Those questions will have a very short response. They will immediately throw the ball back at you. So for example, if you say, "Where are you from?" and they say, "I'm from Toronto." "Oh, great. Now what?" Or they'll say, "I'm from Toronto. How about you?" "Oh, I'm from here." Now ball's back in your court. And can you see when the conversation is so short, when the ball is being passed back and forth so quickly, it makes it very difficult to be present in the moment and not think 15 steps ahead. So you need to elongate their response. You need to make sure that they can respond in a way that's longer. So when you ask a story-based question, meaning ask them a question to which the answer is going to be a story, they're going to give you a much longer response. And when they give you a much longer response, they also give you a lot more material to work with. So for example, instead of saying, "What do you do?" I could ask, "How did you get into the field you're in?" Or I could say, "What makes you get up in the morning?" Or I could say, "What got you to attend this event today?" What are the answers going to be? Some sort of story, some sort of event. And as you continue talking, as you start to learn more and more about them, the longer the stories tend to get, the less you have to talk. So let's say you're at a conference and you met someone after a session and you said, "Hey, what did you find the most useful from that last session?" The question is open-ended enough where they can give you a long answer. So they might say, "Oh, I love when he talked about this business thing or that marketing thing." Now you have multiple things that you can ask more questions around. So you're gathering information, which slows down how fast you have to come up with questions and toss the ball back at them. Can you see what I mean? It helps you relax in conversations more. Now let's say they've given you a response. What do you do next? This is what you do next. You briefly rephrase what you just heard. The reason you do this is twofold. One is you want to show them you're actually listening. Many people ask a question and they're already 5 points ahead and they're not even paying attention to the question they just asked. So then you feel like you're not being heard, you're not being listened to. So to prove to them that you've been listening and you're hearing them, you will briefly rephrase what you just heard. So for example, I said, "What brought you to the event?" And the other person says, "Well, I came 2 years ago and I've been out of the city for a while and now I'm back and I wanted to attend the event again and now I'm here with my friend." How will I rephrase that? I can say, "Oh, so you've been here before and you brought your friend too this time. That's great." That's it. I'm just rephrasing what they've just said. And in that moment, they just feel like they've been heard and they've been understood. This is a technique counselors use. This is a technique salespeople use all the time. So I don't want you to feel like it's going to come across stupid. It's going to make the other person genuinely feel like you're paying attention to them, especially in a world where most people don't. So you ask an open-ended question, you allow them to fill it in, then you briefly rephrase what they've just said to show you're listening. And the second benefit of this is it doesn't come across like an interrogation. Imagine, "What do you do? Where are you from? Why are you here?" That's how most people ask questions back to back to back. So you need to have some sort of a buffer, a break between that. And when you rephrase, it shows you're listening and it also adds a bit of a buffer before you throw your next question. What do you do next? You throw a comment. This is you contributing to the conversation. You're not just talking about them the entire time, but you're commenting on what they've said. So let's take the previous example. They've said, I came here because I've been out of the city and I came back and now I brought a friend. You could say, oh, so you brought a friend. That's interesting. This is actually my first time attending. What did I miss last time? So notice what you did was added one small comment. Hey, this is my first time. And then you repeat the entire process. You ask another question that is open-ended. And now they will tell you another story. They'll give you more information. So all you're doing is listening to something, rephrasing it, commenting a little bit, and then posing another question over and over and over and over again. And what is absolutely hilarious about this technique is that you won't say a whole lot, but the other person will tell you, man, I really felt like we had a good conversation. I feel like we're really connected. There have been people I talked to for an hour and they barely knew a thing about me, and they felt like they walked away having the best conversation of their life. Why? Because I just rephrased, I added a bit of a comment, and I showed them that I was understanding where they're coming from. Now, quick point on rephrasing. Don't just rephrase what they said, but also rephrase and listen to the emotion and the feeling with which they say it. So for example, if someone says, yeah, I just got let go from my job and I'm looking for another job, you could say, it sounds like you're looking for another job. Must be pretty tough for you, especially given how competitive the landscape is right now. Can you see how I'm not just rephrasing what they've said? I'm also emotionally rephrasing what they've just said. I'm saying it with the emotion they said it to me. Now we're connecting not just with the words, but with also the emotion. Now what will also happen is you'll ask someone a story question and they will respond and then they'll throw the question back at you. So this is your opportunity to connect the dots. So you can say, oh, I love how you mentioned you're from Pakistan or you're from Canada. For me, I grew up XYZ, blah, 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 blah. And you tell your story and you let them respond. You let them ask a question. Because the more information they give you, the more ammunition you then have to ask them questions. The more information you give them, the more ammunition they have to ask you questions. And this is how you connect based on stories. You tell your stories, they tell their stories, and now you get to know more about each other, not just emotionally, but also logically. Now you create a connection. So the first method is the ABCR method. You ask a story-based question, you briefly rephrase, you throw a comment in there, and you repeat the whole thing all over again. And trust me, I have done this for hours. I have done this with every sales call I've ever been. I have done this with friends who are going through a rough time. It works exceptionally well. The second technique I use is using assumptions. What are assumptions? Assumptions are, instead of you asking them a question, you make an assumption about them. Believe it or not, people are very curious when you think something about them and they're not sure why. So I'll give you an example. I had a friend of mine who was amazing with women. Like whenever he would go out and meet women at a bar, he was unbelievable. And he would always do the same thing. Whenever he would start a conversation with a stranger, he would always say the same thing. He would say, you sound like the person, you seem like the person, you look like the kind of person, and then he would make an assumption. So one of the things, he was talking to this girl with flowery dress, and he looked at her and said, hey, can't help but notice you seem like the person who's extremely creative. Am I off? And she was a lawyer, but her face lit up because someone had thought about her in that light, and now she was curious, what was it about me? And instantly he was in the conversation. And I've used this many times with people all over the world. When I meet them for the first time, let's say someone grabs my hand and they shake my hand really firmly. I'll say, wow, that's a strong handshake. You must be a bodyguard. Right away, they smile because it's a pattern interrupt. They don't expect that kind of greeting. And the beauty of this technique is you don't have to be correct. You can make an assumption, it can be incorrect, and they can correct you, but their curiosity is still at play. They're still curious why you thought that about them. Now, two things to do is, one, don't put them down with the assumption. Don't say something bad. And two, don't fake it. Don't just say something even though you don't feel that way about them. Genuinely be observant, genuinely be curious, and see what it reminds you of. You seem like, you look like, you sound like, you come across like, Your energy comes across like all of those things are you making assumptions about people. And whether you're right or wrong, you let people fill it in because it creates curiosity. They're just curious, why does this person think of me like this? And it also breaks you out of that value-seeking behavior where, hey, so where are you from? Okay. And how did you get here? Okay. If you just change that to, you must be from Toronto. You sound like the kind of person who's lived here for a while. It just sounds more assertive. And it doesn't sound like you're asking for their investment. You're making an assumption and they will respond by filling it in and giving you more information. And at the same time, you've gotten their curiosity, you're already in rapport. Technique number 3 is something I call chaining. Chaining is, let's say you've completely run out of things to say. You're on stage and you're supposed to be talking about a topic and you completely run out and you still have 10 minutes to kill. What do? This is an exercise I want you to think of, okay? I don't want you to talk like this. Just run with the exercise for a bit. Let me take something on my shelf. Glasses, all right? I'm going to make a sentence out of glasses. Let's say I'm talking about glasses and I say, I like wearing glasses at night. Let's just say that's my phrase. And I run out of things to say. I don't know what to say after that. What I'm then going to do, I'm going to take that sentence in my head. I like wearing glasses at night. I can take I like, I can take glasses, I can take night, and I can create a new sentence out of that. So for example, in this case, let's take glasses. I like wearing glasses at night. Now I'm going to make a new sentence out of glasses. The reason I like glasses at night is because my eyes don't hurt. I'm usually staring at the screen, I'm filming videos, and they tend to burn quite a bit. Now I've said something else. I'm talking about eyes, I'm talking about screen, I'm talking about working, I'm talking about my eyes burning. Now I can chain something else on top of that. So let's say we use the word work. So I say, the reason I like wearing glasses at night is because my eyes are burning and I work all the time. The reason I work for so long is because many of my clients are around the world, they're international, and I have to stay up late and work with them. So can you see how I can just grab a word, create a new sentence out of that, and then run that as long as I can, then grab another word and run that as long as I can, and you will never run out of things to say. So the exercise I like to do is, I like to switch completely every single sentence. And you won't do this in conversation, but it just trains you to never run out of things to say. So here's what I mean. Let's take remote, okay? I have a remote. That's my sentence. I'm going to start with remote. Let's see where I end in the next 60 seconds, all right? This is completely on the spot. I'm not prepared for this. I have a remote. The reason I have a remote is because I have these two lights, and without the remote, they don't function properly. I have to go and turn the switch off. The other reason I have these two lights is because it really helps with my YouTube setup. If I don't have these, they're too bright, they're too dark, and the light up top, it makes my nose look really big, so I don't want all those weird shadows. That's why the light really helps out. Another thing I do have for my setup is this gigantic microphone here. I used to use a laptop mic, but the microphone sound wasn't as good. So the moment I got this microphone, I just feel like it leveled up the audio. And in order to level up other areas of production, I also got a DSLR. So I have a Sony a7 IV that I use to... Can you see how I can just go on and on and on and on? With this exercise, you can talk to a wall and you will never run out of things to say. And you can make this exercise even better if when you think of a word, you go into a story. That it reminds you of an analogy, a metaphor, because then you can talk about even more things. And when you run out of that thing, you take a word, talk about another story. And sometimes when I'm speaking on the spot for 15 minutes, that's all I'm doing. So you will chain all of your words, chain all of your sentences, talk about one subject for as long as you want, and when you want to bounce, pick a subject, go ahead and do it again. So that's technique number 3. Let's talk about technique number 4. This is one I called X and Y. No, this is not a math equation. X and Y is simply when you hear something, or you're talking about something, or you're looking at something, you say, when I think of X, it reminds me of Y. When I think of light bulbs, it reminds me of Y. So let's say someone's talking to you about nuclear physics, and you have absolutely no idea what to say. What are you going to say? Yeah, nuclear physics, that sounds pretty cool, nice. You can't really move the conversation forward from that. So instead you can say, when I think of nuclear physics, it reminds me of the Big Bang Theory. I used to watch that show and it was so scientific. Have you seen that show? Now you have taken control of the conversation and you can run with it. Now you don't always want to hijack the conversation, but you can also just throw that back at them. And you'll be surprised how many times they're actually happy about what it reminds you of. So for example, if someone's talking to me about hockey, I know nothing about hockey, but people in Canada here love talking about hockey, right? So if someone says, oh yeah, hey, this team won 5-1 and it was an amazing match. And I'll say something like, that sounds interesting. When I think of hockey, it reminds me of all those angry dads who show up to support their teenager. That just creates a conversation. When I think of X, it reminds me of Y. If you have something that you can see, hear, you can observe around you, being here reminds me of this. When you said this, you remind me of that. You said you're an engineer. You remind me of this person I just met. You can just interconnect all these things. And again, you can never run out of things to say. When I think of X, it reminds me of Y. Now let's talk about one last thing here before I leave you with a bonus point, which is how the heck do you end a conversation? Have you ever been in a conversation with someone and you don't know how to end? And you awkwardly just wait for them to stop, or it just gets painfully awkward and one of you just has to pretend to go to the bathroom. Which, by the way, don't pretend to go to the bathroom because they'll see that you just walk around in circles, and it's what everyone says when they want to cut a conversation short, and it doesn't feel authentic. So instead, here's what I do. I signal that the conversation is about to come to an end, and I signal what I will do next. So that way they can prepare themselves for the conversation to end instead of, hey, great talking to you, see you later. Now it sounds a bit abrupt. So I'll say something like, let's say you and I are having a conversation. I'll say something like, hey, before I go get some food for myself, I did want to ask you, and I would ask one last question. Or I would say, hey, before I go and get some food and walk around, meet some people here, let me get your LinkedIn. Let's connect in the future. And that's if you actually want to connect with them. And then you do whatever you have to do. You ask them that last question. And once they give you the answer, you have already signaled to them the conversation is over. Then you can say, hey, listen, it was great meeting you. I'll see you around. Shake their hand, move on. That's it. Most people are like, oh, I have to be in this conversation forever, or I have to fake an excuse. I have to fake that I'm going to go here. No, just say what you're going to do. Hey, before we leave, I'm going to walk around, talk to some people for a bit, and then he asks you a question. And then you just close with something. But I really like how you said X, Y, Z. I'm going to think about that. Thank you so much for that. So it doesn't even have to be a question. It could be you acknowledging that the conversation has been good, that you learned something from it, and then you move on. So before you close and you move on, you signal that you're about to close, you ask a question, you tell them what you're going to do next, or you rephrase what you've heard from them, and then you move on. Now, with all of these things being said, I want to leave you with one last thing, because this is the one that took me the longest to learn, and that is this bonus tip. You don't always have to talk. You don't always have to talk. What do I mean by this? Sometimes the best thing to do is not to talk. Sometimes you're in a room where people are talking about something where they're really enjoying themselves and you know nothing about the topic, you have nothing to contribute. It's okay to say nothing, because nothing sounds worse and try hard than someone who has nothing to add, who has to say something, who has to force themselves to talk, because now you sound desperate. Now you look like someone who cannot bear not being part of the conversation. You cannot bear staying quiet. Confidence is in silence. Confidence is in stability. Being okay not talking all the time. Being okay not being the center of attention all the time. So if you don't have something to say, you don't have to say it. You don't have to be part of the conversation. And you'll find sometimes when you don't talk a lot and then you do finally talk, people will respect you more. They respect you more because now every word that comes out of your mouth is a lot more valuable. So hopefully this has been valuable. If you did enjoy this, you can check out some of my free resources and my courses, my coaching, my keynotes, all of that on speaklikeaceo.com. I will see you next time. Take care.